Hello and welcome to the Gold, Ghosts, and Guns podcast for today, Tuesday, February 9th, 2021. It's the day after my 53rd birthday, and I'm absolutely chuffed to have with me Patrick Henningsen over at 21st Century Wire. We're going to talk about something today that I don't know much about at all, actually. And Patrick tweeted some stuff out about why Jeff Bezos left, the real reason why he left the CEO of Amazon. And it just kind of blew my mind. And I'm like, dude, we need to talk about this. So pinged him immediately. Patrick, as always, is gracious enough to do this stuff on 12 hours notice, which is I absolutely love him for. So Patrick, good morning. How are things in horrible lockdown fascist old England?
Hi, Tom. Great to be with you. Yeah, it's dark. It's cold. We're all under house arrest. What more can I report? It's absolutely brilliant.
It's a lovely English morning. There's this fog everywhere. Fascism is in the air, and the rain comes straight down.
Yeah, or snow in it today. So it's pretty cold.
It's terrible. I'm so sorry. So, like I said in the intro, I'm like, I like a lot of people. I was a little shocked when I saw that Bezos was stepping down as the CEO of Amazon, either because, the first thought that went through my head was, well, mission accomplished. And now I get to go off and I've, built the surveillance state and, I've built all this stuff. So now I'm going to go off and, just be Dr. Evil on my own private island or whatever. And not that I've always thought that about Bezos. I've always been a little bit more generous towards him than that. But I was watching a video that you put out through 21st Century Wire about the real reason why he stepped down. It has to do with satellites and his blue. I want to say it was Blue Harvest, right? No, that's not right.
Blue Origin.
Blue Origin, sorry. Blue Harvest is the fake name of Return of the Jedi, which is why it was in the top of my head, because as everybody well knows, I'm ridiculous.
Bohai Harvest in Hunter Biden's firm in China.
Right. That's true. So we're all just riffing off at George Lucas here at this point. That his Blue Origin space company is angling apparently to be the next railroad baron. So give me some commentary on that, because I don't understand. I mean, I understand some of what I saw, but really delve into this and give the listeners an idea of what's actually going on, or what you think is going on.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when I saw that report, it was put up by the New American. They do some great work, and Daniel Natal, he does a program on their YouTube channel, and he put out this report. And I had started writing a book on some of these issues a couple of years ago, which I had to put on hold with regards to Space Force, right around the time when Donald Trump launched Space Force. And I was surprised too, because Amazon's really riding high in terms of the global corporate scene, the tech scene. And so why would Jeff Bezos depart? I mean, he's really, I think Amazon's certainly at their peak. Not that this is as far as they're going to go, but in terms of their sort of dominance and his position and the kind of global billionaires hierarchy in the world of tech with Amazon, AWS, Amazon Web Servers. He owns the Washington Post, and also he has Blue Origin. And the report that was on the New American, they're talking about the fact that Bezos needs to spend more time and dedicate more time and energy to his other ventures, and this is the most important thing going forward. And if you look at how much Elon Musk has been in the news lately, with regards to SpaceX, for instance. I mean, he's in all the time now. They've just done some groundbreaking launches. I mean, for a private company, I think they've pretty much broken all the barriers and eclipsed NASA in many respects.
Sure.
But although they're partnering with the U.S. government and NASA as well. So these two characters, these two oligarchs, these two entrepreneurs, or as they're saying in Daniel Natal's report, the future robber barons of the 21st century, in that if you looked at the last industrial revolution, the turn of the century, from the 1900s into the 20th, from the 1800s into the 20th century, into the 1900s, the people who owned the means of transportation during that time certainly had a tremendous amount of power and leverage, certainly more than anybody else with regards to railroads, and in the United States specifically, the Transcontinental Railroad there, and the Carnegies and all the other people during that time, the Rockefellers and many others. So they really drove politics, and in fact, that they also drove U.S. history in a certain sense. Because of the Civil War is also, a lot of people don't know, part of the reason why the Civil War happened wasn't merely because of the issue of slavery, but there are a number of other issues. One of the biggest ones, and arguably one of the biggest ones weighing on Abraham Lincoln's mind at the time, was the collection of taxes, because the U.S. had, passed some, let's say, more punitive tariffs. I think it was the Morrill Tariff Act.
It was the Morrill Tariff, or what they call the Tariff of Abomination, right?
Having trouble collecting those taxes from the southern states.
Yeah, well, it was that, and that was a 40% tax on imports from the south to the north, and it was to make those goods completely and utterly unmarketable, and that's why the South. I'm firmly convinced that's why the South seceded, and it's also Lincoln was elected for this reason, because this was the first corporate lawyer as president. That's who Lincoln was, and everything else is, in many ways, such a whitewash of the real history here. I've gone into this in the past when talking about James Buchanan and the Panic of 1857, and how he refused to bail out the Ohio Bank and the Ohio and U.S. New York banks that went bankrupt, shut everything down, and between that and not refusing to prosecute the southern states from seceding, that's what led to the split within the Democratic Party and blah blah blah. So.
And so one of the big issues around that time was land acquisition. And so the railroad moguls used different tactics. Certainly they had the money and the leverage. They could hire the muscle to, or convince people to sell for very cheap, sell their land holdings so that the railroad could come through, buy whole plots of land to start railway towns, for instance. So basically that's where you could argue if we go into a post-industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, whereby it's the large profit margins are not necessarily in the transportation of physical goods and services, as has been the case for the last 150 years, but in terms of the distribution and movement of information and bandwidth. And so if you think about raising this grid that's on the planet right now, and you lift it up into the low orbit of Earth, then who are going to be the new railway moguls in this certain epoch? And certainly two individuals jump out right now. One is Elon Musk, and the other is Jeff Bezos. And if you look at Amazon, Bezos is, although Elon Musk is much more media friendly, he's much more high profile. He's incredibly interesting person to listen to as well. He's got a certain wit about him, and he's very in touch with all these different issues and how they interrelate. Jeff Bezos isn't so much that type of person in the media, so he doesn't get a lot of attention. But arguably, Amazon and Bezos could play a much bigger role than Elon Musk in this next phase. And if you look at Amazon, what is Amazon.com? They don't. Amazon doesn't make a tremendous amount of money on the retail shopping side. It's a big economy. The margins are razor thin. They're practically giving it away in many cases. So, but what do? They do data. They do big data. They do AI. They do web services. And arguably those are going to be the more profitable centers of that empire going forward. So just to wrap around this, because I think we've kind of jumped around a little bit here. Blue Origins is his space program. So the space company. So what
that Daniel Natal was arguing in that video was that those who can lift the satellites into space and control the information that's moving from space back down to the planet, or in general, just be able to, those who have control over the information lanes are actually the ones who then will control what goods and services will actually move forward. Because, and don't get me wrong, I think Daniel's analysis was very interesting and certainly provocative. At the end of the day, I think Vladimir Putin, when he was at virtual Davos last week or week and a half ago, poo-pooed the entire Fourth Industrial Revolution as the idea of, honestly, children. Because at the end of the day, we still do have to move real goods and services to make a real economy. Yes, the margins are all in moving data, because the cost of moving data is minuscule compared to this cost of moving 100 tons of soybeans, right? But at the end of the day, you can't eat data. There's still an opportunity cost to produce goods, and from an economic standpoint. So it's an intriguing thesis, and it's something that we absolutely need to be aware of. I just, as we were listening to this, I'm like, yeah, but we still have to move goods. We still have to put iron on. We still have to move stuff around. Now, when we start, a space-based economy like we see in something like The Expanse, which runs on Amazon, by the way, and what a real solar system economy or inversion of it could look like. Well, yeah, the information pipelines are going to be the means by which to accumulate capital, I think, is what Daniel's biggest worry is. So what do you think about that? Right.
Well, that is true. That is true. But what is also the case is that let's just take Elon Musk's his Starlink satellite system. They've already got approval from the FCC for 12,000 satellites. And so they should have 1,500 in low Earth orbit by the end of 2022. Right. And in total, and then to add another 12,000 and then an additional 30,000 satellites after that, between now and 2030, I think. So what does that mean? That this is a massive array of communication satellites in low Earth orbit, and which will supply a number of things. One of those being 5G internet service via satellite, and that is very much, from an economic standpoint, that's a massive game changer. Because if you think about it, the trends in which not the brick and mortar economy like you're saying, we still need to move goods and services and so forth physically, but you won't be constrained if you are working in the information space or anything related to that. In your job description, you will not be confined to geographical location, right? And not even by whether there's going to be fiber internet or not in the mountains, wherever you want to live. Right. So globally, that's very much a game changer. That brings a lot of potential problems with it, with the current way that our world is structured with nation states. I mean, so technology is putting pressure on traditional structures of human organization, political organization as well. I'm talking about the nation state, the post-Westphalian nation state. So, but that's a little bit of a far projection there.
I think you're actually hitting on the exact issue that we're dealing with. And I think that, when you listen to the WEF guys, the World Economic Forum guys, the Klaus Schwabs and the George Soroses, they're talking in these terms because they can see this happening, and it's anathema to them, right? What they're worried about, they keep talking about doing away with the nation state because we need to have a global government, because what they really are saying is that we see a democratization of our power through the transmission of information. So this is why they want complete control over it, and they want to do away with, and they want a transnational superstate of regulations, which regulates the flow of the information itself.
Yes.
And that's all. That's what they really care about, and that's what the TTIP is about. That's what the TPP is about. It's what the Paris Accords are all about. All of these things are just ways of binding down, so that, in the famous words of Jean-Claude Juncker, the former head of the European Commission, there can be no democratic choice against the treaties. We'll just remove the EU treaties from that statement and just say the treaties. okay, that have been signed by everybody. And what we're living through the middle of right now is this coup by these people taking over every major national government in the West in order to ensure that this happens come hell or high water. So now the question is, and I say this with no degree of irony or anything else, where do you actually think Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are in this? Like, what side are they actually on? I mean, I know they're billionaires, and they're all, and in Musk's case, he was created by government largesse, right? He was created by the Obama administration for all intents and purposes. But at the same time, we're doing this on the morning of the February 8th, when Elon Musk comes out and says Tesla just bought $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin and will take them for selling their cars. And we know that, and he sent the price of Bitcoin to $45,000, right? And if it holds through the day, it's going to 100. Okay. So from my technical perspective, this is what I think is happening. So where is Musk in all of this? Because on one day, the guy's like a chameleon. On one day, he looks like the biggest, the biggest simp for government, imaginable. He's the government made man. He looks like that guy. And then the next guy, he looks like the most based motherfucker you ever saw. I can't reconcile these two things with him. And he's like a joker. And he's this two-faced kind of Janus person. I cannot, for the life of me, figure out Elon Musk, whether I should be on his side or not.
Hi, I'm Warwick Davis, and you may know me as the little fella off the telly, but I'm also big in business. Listen to my new podcast series, Figureheads, where I chat to sporting trailblazers, dance revolutionaries, and entertainment innovators, finding out how they navigated their business through some extraordinary events and situations. You'll pick up useful skills and tips from the most unlikely of places, all brought to you by Barclaycard Business. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We're still open for drive-through and McDelivery, but helping keep you and our team safe is our priority. So we have fewer people working. We have screens in our kitchens and service areas. We're washing our hands more regularly and cleaning equipment and surfaces even more often too. For now, we're serving a reduced menu. And to keep everyone moving quickly and safely, please use contactless payment. And from pickup to drop-off, delivery is contact-free. With smaller teams, service will take longer than usual, so thank you for your patience. For specific restaurant hours, visit mcdonalds.co.uk or download our app. Opening hours may vary.
And kind of the same way with Bezos. I don't know if Amazon is or is not a force for good, and how much of it is the tail, i.e. the CIA that has that owns the Washington Post and all the rest of it. How much of that is wagging Amazon's dog at this point, or is Amazon still in control of its own company? I don't know. What do you think? Because I'm really still very confused about this.
Well, if you were, let's just start with Jeff Bezos. I mean, if you were that wealthy and there were no laws in terms of antitrust or someone being able to own parts of the information superhighway, and look at what they did to Parler recently. Amazon Web Servers that colluded with Apple and Google Play and others to basically shut down a major emerging competitor. Mm-hmm. But to own something like the Washington Post is, if you're wealthy, that's a tool in your toolbox. Mm-hmm. To what? It gives you some leverage. Mm-hmm. And in a way, it can keep the government regulation at bay as well. It can keep you on side with the prevailing political forces if you need to be. So I saw that very much as a strategic thing. He's definitely in business with the CIA with regards to Amazon Web Servers, probably with the NSA. Probably he's going to be in business with the Pentagon as well. Sure. Maybe in business with other militaries or other government agencies around the world, much in the same way that Microsoft is really. I mean, those are all Microsoft clients. I mean, every local government in the world, every national government. Iran's, I think their old nuclear facilities were running on Microsoft systems, and this is how they were able to launch Stuxnet through the back door of that. That's just something that I had heard at the time, but that gives you kind of a little glimpse into that. I think they're positioning themselves as middlemen, Tom. In much
Right.
the same way that people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos throughout history have been middlemen, have been kind of conduits between the government, the people, the consumer population, and then the resources, and those who own the mines, who own the resources as well, because even Musk and Bezos and people like this are also dependent on other people for them to do the business that they do as well. So the old money is still there in the background as well. So, but they're driving forward with their technology, with their vision of the future. You mentioned Davos and the World Economic Forum earlier, and that's important because that's the kind of, the Klaus Schwabs of the world and the people that populate TED Talks and things like this. These are the spiritual leaders of this generation of entrepreneurial billionaires that have this beautiful vision of the world in the future, and so they derive their meaning, they derive their ethos, their logos, all of these things from what to me is emerging very much like a new religion.
Absolutely.
A type of an atheistic religion, but it's still a religion, a secular religion, you could call it, a globalized faith.
It's transhumanism and all the rest of it. And when people lose their when people lose their religion, as it were, when they don't have one, they invent one. Like one of the problems I've talked with my wife about this for a long time. I think I talked about this with Uber Boyo when he was on the podcast a couple months ago. We talked about the problems of the Enlightenment. And I'm not the first person to make this connection, certainly, or make this criticism, which is that part of the problem with the Enlightenment, as great as it was that it also created the meaning crisis, something that Brett Weinstein and others have talked about as well. Is that we now are 300 years into this, and what we have is generations of people who've grown up without any fundamental meaning, have lost connection to the meaning and purpose of what humanity is supposed to be doing. And when that happens, people always substitute and find a different religion. And what we've done is we've substituted, the state for God, or elevated the state to godhood. And people like, Schwab and the others also, and they've lifted themselves up to that level, I think. And they're at the Ozymandias from the Watchmen level, right? Of saying, well, my success is so immense that it must be because I'm so much more insouciant and wise and above it all than these little people down here who don't see the big picture. I see the big picture. I'm the God, and you should all worship. And in effect, you should all worship me, or at least worship what I worship, right? Which is my ideals, and Putin just walked into Davos and told Klaus Schwab he was, literally full of shit.
Yeah. Their ideals, Tom, their ideals. What are their ideals in actuality? That's the important question.
And what their ideals are in actuality is rules for thee, but not for me.
Yes, exactly.
It's just that simple, and it's so very obvious, I think, at this point. And the goal for us is to keep exposing these people at every level. But when I look at guys like Musk and Bezos, I don't know that I see that yet. Right. So, a lot of the libertarian commentators have noticed over the years how Jeff Bezos went from being like a nerd to then, over the course of time, you look at his wardrobe and his affect and his personal affect, and it's just gotten more and more and more Dr. Evil as it's gone along. He almost looks like Dr. Evil now, with the shaved head and working out, and he's got the pantsuit, got the Kim Jong-un pantsuit going on, and he just looks like Dr. Evil, right? And Hillary did that same thing when she ran for president, and maybe that's a reflection of the change in his mindset. I don't know, because
it's really interesting that you bring this up.
Sure.
Definitely, he's definitely projecting a more alpha male image in recent years. It's very much a departure from the nerdy tech entrepreneur that was running books in his garage,
right,
in the early days of Amazon. But look at his philanthropical interests right now, his organizations. He's also making that transition that Bill Gates made. You remember when Microsoft was under so much pressure from the antitrust and the government lawsuits, and then he reinvented himself as a philanthropist,
right?
Bill Gates, and then he took on this vision of the anointed for the future, and a lot of this was also, in my opinion, co-opted from his his father's Malthusian proclivities.
Yes, no, absolutely. And you mentioned something earlier when you brought Microsoft into the conversation. I wanted to don't circle back to it, and I want to get to it before I forget it. Which is that I'm becoming very enamored of the theory that these big tech firms are always chosen by our government, and they're chosen to be successful. Microsoft was chosen because Bill Gates' father was a Malthusian with those proclivities and a eugenicist, and therefore, with his damaged psyche, would be the perfect guy to run the tech monopoly that is Microsoft. The same thing that Intel was chosen because the government spent how much money? No one ever talked about this when Microsoft was making all this money. How much of their quarterly revenue was government contracts? 20%, 30%, 50%, 70%. What is it? And you can make the argument that we have that same issue happening with Amazon, right? How much of their budget is actually that right now as opposed to anybody else? And the upset of the apple cart was that was supposed to be in place forever until Apple screwed things up and made the BlackBerry sexy and called it the iPhone. And that changed everything. It changed, and Microsoft didn't know what to do because they were such a dysfunctional organization at that point, right, run by Steve Ballmer, that they couldn't shift. But now Gates, who was groomed to be the guy he is today, right? And I think you're absolutely onto something with that. It just kind of fills in what I've been thinking about Gates for a long time. Now, ask yourself the question: was Musk one of these guys that was chosen to be? It was Bezos the one? Was he chosen? Was Amazon somehow chosen to be the online retailer that was going to do this? Or was it just they saw the avarice in Jeff Bezos and then just kept, building that up?
I think in the case of Elon Musk, I think he put himself forward to be that person. I mean, it's pretty bold. I mean, people were making fun of him when he started SpaceX because they had a few mishaps and a few rocket failures at the beginning, and everyone's like, you shouldn't be doing this. This is the business of NASA, etc. Let the Russians supply our rockets. We're getting them from Russia, which still are to some degree. The lifts up to the International Space Station.
We don't have
that won't be for long.
Right.
But so he's put himself. It's quite a bold move. What he's done in an entrepreneur sense, much more than other people. But your other point is also really key, is that to be in that position, Microsoft is a good example. Their income, and Bezos as well, this is taxpayer income, which is being filtered back to them through government contracts. And this is guaranteed income for the company, affords a certain stability in terms of long-term, low-risk investment. Not everybody has those advantages. So once you get your foot on that ladder, defense contractors are the same. Of course, they need wars to keep the share price up. Right. But what's even more interesting, let's circle back to the individual. Jeff Bezos, you look at his charities, his philanthropic charities. He's got the Day One Fund. This is like leadership grants for people working with, social, homeless, social justice stuff. And they're doling out as much money as the government on a kind of annual basis to some of these types of organizations. And the Bezos Earth Fund, all about climate change. And then you've got Blue Origin and you've got Washington Post. But the humanitarian stuff is where you can get a glimpse into what type of person this is, what their vision of the world, what their worldview is. I find it interesting as hyper-capitalists, these people like Bezos, for instance. But, politically, they're all on Democrat, promoting democratic socialism, and they themselves have benefited from the free market economy like nobody else. Right. And so you'd think that they'd be putting their money in terms of grants in things that are to help change the course of federal government policy, and maybe to look at things in terms of real economics. I'm having this conversation with you because I know you know what I'm talking about. The welfare state. Has that been good for is that driving homelessness and poverty, or is it eliminating it? And I think the evidence shows since the 1960s that it is driving it.
Oh, absolutely.
And what else? The minimum wage issue.
drives. Yeah, no, all of these. I agree with you, Patrick, and you're right. But again, you have to go back to ask yourself what you said. Go back to what you said earlier, which is that he bought the Washington Post as a strategic investment to keep the government off his back. Some of these, now in the case of Gates, I think all of those foundations are a reflection of who he is as a person. But Bezos, I think you can make a different argument for that. He might just be making those arguments in order to continue that you're just extending that same argument of I'm putting up some money for the green fund because I've got to do that. But really what he cares about is understanding how to get us out of, I'm not defending him. I'm just playing devil's advocate here because I don't have a good read on Jeff Bezos at all. But I think the case can be made for both sides of the argument, right? That he could be, an evil oligarch. But at the same time, the political trend is you don't buck the political trend if you want to stay on top.
That's
and
right.
The political trend is what it is, and it's a mind virus that's going completely crazy, out of control. Because Klaus, he knows better than we do that Klaus Schwab is literally trying to ruin the West, and play a big power game and to subjugate China, Russia, and put Europe at the center of the world. A bunch of feckless European old money back in charge of the world, which no one wants. Literally nobody wants. So is SpaceX, Blue Origin, Elon Musk, Bitcoin, all of this stuff. Remember, Amazon wanted to be in Bitcoin. They wanted to accept Bitcoin, and they did briefly back in like 2013 or 2014. And then the minute they did that, the CFTC came around and said, nope, we have to, we're classifying it as property, meaning then that every transaction would be subject to capital gains tax. Right. And that just put the kibosh on that. And that's why Bitcoin doesn't quote unquote circulate, right? But Amazon, I remember Amazon wanting to take both Bitcoin and Litecoin early days on this when they were much smaller because they saw the future. So again, it's a good question. I mean, again, I'm no disparaging to Daniel Natal's work here, but I think there's two sides to the story that maybe and fair enough in our world right now, we should be skeptical as hell of all of these people because we're not getting any truth. We're not getting any real information, right? We don't.
If you're the government, Tom, right. you're gonna want these companies, these empires to drive technology forward. I mean, the United
right.
States still largely operates, with the private sector pushing innovation, pushing forward in industries like this. So, I mean, they're looking at it like that's the vanguard. Let them go, and then we're going to ride along with it. And they're going to probably provide some of our infrastructure. That Elon Musk's satellite or Starlink, that's going to provide part of the backbone of the U.S. military internationally on the ground. That the telecommunications, the biggest broadband providers, same with Blue Origin. But Amazon Web Servers in the cloud could potentially run the U.S., NATO, and a couple of other countries, Israel's F-35 fleet, which right. is very much heavily dependent on satellite and GPS and various other reconnaissance systems that are going to be running the cloud, and it's certainly going to be low Earth orbit satellites. They'd want to deliver that. They say it's future-proof. This is how the F-35 program was sold. I don't think it's going to last very long in terms of manned fighters. We're getting right. into the military conversation here, but I think it's important because it does speak to the great power competition. You mentioned Vladimir Putin at Davos, virtual Davos recently, but then the inroads China's making in terms of space, in terms of satellite technology and presence. The Iranians also have mobile missile stroke satellite deployment they've just launched. And they've been doing this for years, but it hasn't got a lot of news. And they launched successfully a couple of like 45 kilogram small satellites from these types of launchers that can double as missile launchers. And now they can do 220 kilogram small satellites, right. Can go up as far as like 500 kilometers. That's the top orbit that they can reach. And so, I mean, if you think about the disruptive potential of that, I mean, if it's going to be 30,000 plus array of low Earth orbit satellites, there's a lot of issues that are going to come with that. You could blind the entire U.S. military.
Oh, yeah. There's all sorts of things that can be done here. And and now you have to ask yourself the question. I mean, by creating this kind of infrastructure that's dependent upon this kind of technology, I mean, this to me all just feels like Act 3 Atlas Shrugged stuff. Like the dumbest people in the world are in charge of some of the most idiotic forms of technology that wind up killing a whole lot of people, right? Go back to the last act of Atlas Shrugged when they unveiled the big sonic weapon which kills everybody at the demonstration, right? Or the train that the tunnel that with the train that asphyxiates everybody, right? How dumb, right? When you start thinking about the F-35 not being able to fly because going to fall out of the sky because Iran launches a friggin' missile that wipes out an entire area of entire part of the satellite network, or better yet, the Russians are how close to putting small nuclear power plants on missiles, right? That will fly for days on end, and then all they got to do is put a laser on there and just literally start shooting satellites out of the sky as the thing orbits the Earth, because that's on the table, because they have the laser technology as of right now, right? From ground-based systems. Now miniaturize that with a nuclear power plant, and then by 2030, the Russians will be shooting satellites out of the sky with lasers.
Well, there's also, it's not just about eliminating the satellite, but at the minute you do this, if any of this activity starts, China also can deploy ground-based. They have very good ground-based deployment of satellites as well. They could do mobile debris. Once you have debris in orbit, this could potentially be chaotic.
Yes.
And we're also talking about air travel as well. And this is also something that people aren't thinking about. A lot of air travel has been grounded because of the, quote, global pandemic. But these airlines are also will be heavily dependent, I'm sure, on these systems. So I think there will be an international consensus that the stability. So in other words, the private barons, the Bezos of the world, the Musks, they're providing this privatized infrastructure, and then the government is using this as the backbone of their operations, different governments, different militaries, and civilians as well. So the stability of it becomes a global issue. So there would be, this global consensus, like we need stability of this system. We need quote market stability. And this is an interesting point that we brought up. I did an interview with Brian Berletic from Land Destroyer, formerly Tony Carlucci. And Brian was talking about how the foreign policy machine works, and we were sketching out some scenarios. And the whole point of the U.S. foreign policy, the fact that it doesn't change from administration to administration that much, not fundamentally, is because the transnational corporations, these people that really don't respect borders or national affiliations, other than it's just incidental for them where they happen to be born and what passport they have. They require a degree of market stability, and that's really what U.S. post-World War II U.S. foreign policy is really about. It's creating market stability for select amount of corporations so that they can invest in infrastructure, so they can go in and do business, get access to markets, sell products, and dominate markets. And so in a way, it is great power competition, 21st century.
Sure.
And it does reflect the imperial competition, the colonial competitions of old. But that's kind of where it's at. And I think the same would be, Tom, with space. I think we'd see they use the same methods on the ground and just kind of raise it up. So then we're, again, this is nudging us closer towards global governance.
Right.
So
because the whole thing is also creating what we haven't touched on, but what's still sitting here implied in the background, of course, is a global surveillance state. You have a full 5G blanket network around the world where we can already read license plates from space, right? And yet they tell us that they can't find ISIS. Like for years they did this, right? I said, well, we can read license plates from space, but we can't find ISIS. in the
Right.
desert. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I believe that. So we can relicense places from space. We can do all this stuff. And we have a 5G blanket network that will allow, people like me who don't want to be anywhere near anybody else. And I can live out in the middle of nowhere and still have bandwidth so that I can, piss off about the government. Sounds great. I'm all done. Really doesn't, though, because I don't really want that. Because I understand exactly what that entails, which is that, yeah, they're watching it everywhere, and that's why they want all the data and everything else. And so then the bigger question is, who's going to control that? Because it's very obvious. I mean, and I've been the older I get and the more I do this political stuff, the more I realize just how much I hate to say it, the Marxist left in the the racist Marxist left in the United States who complains about white people, how in some ways right they are about the colonial mindset and the extractive mindset of Western culture, right? And that, because it hasn't ended. All this, what we just described, hasn't ended. Now, whether Bezos and Musk are part of that, or whether they represent just the new guys who just want to come in, just the millennials who want to come in here and, or Gen Xers or whatever, want to come in here and just make a bunch of money off of it, right?
Yeah.
And just or are they ideologically aligned with it? I don't think they are. But, even if they're not, right, even if they just want to, make their vig off of it and, provide services to the world, the old infrastructure, the mindset of, old French and German and Portuguese and Italian and British colonialists hasn't ended. If anything, this is everything we were talking about is funneling a restoration of what they think is going to be a restoration of their power. That's what the Great Reset is, right? It's a restoration of European power, European primacy, where all roads have to go through Europe because we have created the perfect technocratic state. We've built a better Soviet Union. And the Chinese are going, no. And the Russians are going, no. And, the people on the ground in Europe are going, no. And the people in the United States went no, and they said yes. And they said, no, you can't, you have to take the fungus Biden. I'm like, really? We're going to do this. Okay. And I don't know that they have all these plans, right? Right. Yeah. Everybody's got plans, but I'm beginning to feel more like the Joker. Everybody's got plans, right? From the Dark Knight. You all are schemers. You're all dirty schemers. Like, my job is to blow up the schemes of the schemers. That's my job. I'm just like a dog with if I chasing a car. If I ever caught it, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Well, I know what to do with the car if I catch the car. But you understand they're creating more and more Jokers every day. Yeah. And I don't know that they're going to be able to pull this off. But that's a different discussion for a different day. But so I just wanted to throw that out there or get it off my chest.
You're right, Tom. I believe that is what the Great Reset represents. It's definitely a revanchist move by European elites, as definitely driven by Germany at the center as they're the most dominant power within the EU. Also, but then it's interesting. I think it was one of the defense forums. The Elon Musk was speaking to one of the Pentagon generals about China, and he said, "Look, you're going to have to get used to this reality, which is going to be happening. Is that if China does, they have 3 times, 4 times, I don't know, 5 times the population of the U.S. 5 times.
Right. 5 times.
All they have to do is increase their GDP per person." By a very small percentage, and then they will have twice the GDP of the United States.
Right.
So from a geopolitical point of view, the U.S. will look at that, and maybe if they want to maintain pole position, if Europe wanted to jointly maintain pole position with the United States, then they would say, how can we lower China's GDP per capita? Could we do this by depressing our economies? I mean, would they go that far? Is to create a global crash and then do a reformat that would give them a strategic and competitive advantage technologically with a new reserve currency? Is that what we're seeing with the Great Reset? That's another question I might.
At Honda, we listen to the unexpected for inspiration. Like feet. All that tapping, stepping, stopping and starting. That's a lot of energy. Energy that could be used to charge a battery. The new Honda CR-V Hybrid turns braking into charge for a more efficient drive, which means less stopping for fuel. Honda, the power of dreams. We're still open for drive-through and McDelivery, but helping keep you and our team safe is our priority. So we have fewer people working. We have screens in our kitchens and service areas. We're washing our hands more regularly and cleaning equipment and surfaces even more often too. For now, we're serving a reduced menu. And to keep everyone moving quickly and safely, please use contactless payment. And from pickup to drop-off, delivery is contact-free. With smaller teams, service will take longer than usual, so thank you for your patience. For specific restaurant hours, visit mcdonalds.co.uk or download our app. Opening hours may vary.
I think that's part of their plan, and the Chinese are looking at that going, that's why we're going to build a consumer economy that doesn't worry about the need to sell stuff to American consumers. We're already in the post American consumer global economy. I mean, we're already peaked on that. The Chinese and the Southeast Asian, and it's not just China. I mean, you've got to look at, Thailand and Vietnam and Indonesia and the Philippines. There's 2.5 billion people. Most of them are unbanked. Like, there's so much. The total addressable market in these places is staggering.
Yeah.
Relative to what we've seen in the West, and the numbers that we can generate in the West, and the dynamism of our economies is being stamped out. It's already been destroyed in Europe. There is no economic dynamism in Europe.
I was talking about someone from the fashion industry before Christmas,
right?
And who does business with China and other countries, and he said to me, he said, do you realize that you think Bill Gates is rich in the U.S. and we have a rich list in Europe and the U.S. He said, do you know there's 100 Bill Gateses in China?
Right.
There's 100 Bill Gateses. There's 100 Elon Musks.
Right.
See that they don't keep rich lists.
Right.
All these people. So there's people that aren't say on the quote rich list. By the way, in India, exactly the same. They don't keep the quote rich list. There's a few high profile people that are always in the media, and they're also philanthropists, and they bankroll things, and they get their celebrity status for being wealthy. Said, but the really wealthy people, the trillionaires, believe it or not, there are trillionaires on the planet.
Sure.
They're not on the rich list, and their holdings are diversified, and they're incredibly wealthy. As much as Bill Gates, they probably don't have the acumen of social engineering and the political strategic capability of someone like Bill Gates, who's gaming now the pharmaceutical industry,
right?
Who's gaming public health, who's gaming government policy through this COVID crisis, and
has a direct ear to Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, who as a good globalist lapdog that he is always uses his own population as the guinea pig for whatever dumb thing they want to, whatever dumb next phase of the Great Reset they want to do. Like, it was Modi. I know Martin Armstrong has talked about this. Like, Modi and Gates sat down for a day, and 2 days later or a week later, Modi canceled all currency above effectively the $20 bill. Okay, because that conversation happened, and that's Modi's job in all of this. So like, Modi is absolutely selling out. He's like, he's absolutely selling out India to the Great Reset. He's absolutely a part of it in every way. They've used India as the test case for so many of these things. And what I'm going to be interested in watching is this is the part that people don't understand, and it's something that Putin made in his speech. The point Putin made in his speech quite explicitly. He said, "Look, nominal GDP does not matter. By the way, nominal GDP, the raw number of dollars that you spent this year, that doesn't matter. What matters is the GDP per capita on a purchasing power parity basis, which is a much less well discussed or documented number. It's documented as well as anything else, but it's in terms of purchasing power parity, the national GDP and then GDP per capita. Russia is a bigger country now than Germany, right? Mm-hmm. Russia's economy, even the only reason Russia's economy looks like it's the size of Canada's is because it's all normalized to dollars. But what you normalize, the actual output in terms of the purchasing power of the average Russian, they have more purchasing power than the average German.
Yes.
And the German industrial situation is one that is continuing to slide. It's under complete pressure to remake itself and become green, while the Russians are just beginning to hit on all cylinders. I mean, one of the biggest pieces of news that no one talks about is the admission or the announcement that they finally finished an all Russian built and part sourced version of competitor to the 737 and the Airbus A320. So that doesn't sound like a lot because we've had these things for years, right? The thing is that drives an entire supply chain of goods and services, and it tries to drive at an aerospace level of performance. I've worked in the plating industry. I've worked in the materials industry. I know what that looks like. We tried to become an automotive OEM at the company I worked for. It wasn't going to happen. We didn't have the tolerances, right, to do automotive OEM work. Toyota, for example, drove better cars out of the United States by driving up the performance of all of their subcontractors, who are all the same subcontractors that GM and Ford used, but by Toyota driving excellence at these subcontractors and these OEMs, it made GM's cars better. It made Ford's cars better. Well, I've got news for you. The same thing is happening in Russia. At every level, just the emergence of the commercial airline industry in Russia changes the whole dynamic of where that economy can and will go.
Not only that, their defense
and then multiply
industry,
that by 10 or 12 other industries, by the way.
Their defense industry it's so well calibrated for their economy. It's not bloated at all. Look at what Russia spends on defense per year. It's something like
it's $53 to $54 billion.
It's in real terms, I'd probably say it's more like between 60 and 80.
Right. Yeah. When you normalize the ruble for, when you go back.
What does the U.S. spend? The U.S. spends over $1 trillion in total if you count deployments, bases, everything. I mean, it's just. Well, it's mind-boggling.
It's a different mindset. And then, of course, what the Russians are building, they're building homegrown chips, they're building homegrown this, all that stuff's happening. And their biotech industry, they're all that's coming. And
so Russia doesn't need to start 3 new wars every 2 years to keep its defense infrastructure buoyant, which the United States kind of does. It's just the way it's set up. And so they need all these deployments. They need to be in Germany and Stuttgart. They need to be in South Korea. They need to be in Okinawa. They need to have a whole bunch of new bases being planned for the Sahel region and the east coast of Africa and the Indonesia area, the archipelagos. This is what is required to feed that monster. So if Russia does get into the commercial aerospace game, they're going to be very good at it. If you just look at the performance and design of their Sukhoi and their new MiG fighters, and they're unbelievable, the stuff that they're able to do. I mean, there's nobody even close.
No, there isn't.
There's
no
terms
one
of performance.
Close.
Yeah.
Right. And so now, translate that into what's going to come when they decide to truly get back into the space race. And they're already in this. They're certainly still in the space race. But when you really start to think about what they're talking about, and so when Putin says, y'all have to really take a step back and stop, sniffing your own farts. And really look at the world as it's going to be, what's going to happen. Because if you go this route, and Xi basically said the same thing, but he was much more polite than Putin was.
I mean, China has the economic muscle to compete potentially with the U.S. in certain aspects of the new digital and low Earth orbit information superhighway, the new military in space, and this sort of competition. They can compete with aspects of it.
Right.
But the U.S. has a huge jump in terms of innovation, and then the private sector in specialization, and also just they know how to lock into the demand and how to operationalize it, how to monetize everything. But Russia's, I guarantee you, whatever you think Russia has developed, that's public. There's probably, and you could say the same for the U.S., but
Sure.
Russia's ambitions are not to dominate the world. Right. So in terms of defensive technology, in terms of disruptive technology, Russia doesn't need to dominate the world. All they need to do is be able to disrupt. That's what the S-400, S-300 missile systems were about. That basically renders Air Force and air power pretty much obsolete when it's operationalized. The reason they don't use it all the time, or no one wants to use it in Syria, for instance, is also strategically they don't always also give away the technology when it's deployed. It has to be for a good reason, because then it becomes public and more is learned about it, and then you lose your defensive edge. But that's all that was required. It's the whole Cold War paradigm was based on even the space treaty of 1967, I think, the Outer Space Treaty, that the anti-ballistic missile treaty, all of these agreements between the Soviet Union and the West were all dependent on mutually assured destruction, so that you could both have all of the offensive weaponry, and you all had to agree on having the identical defensive weaponry. So, for instance, for the ABM treaty, the agreement between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, and which was grandfathered in with the Russian Federation when that became Russia, that was, I think it was like you could have one defensive location and 100 interceptors. That's what both countries were allowed with that agreement. So if that falls by the wayside, then one country is able to have. That's what SDI was, Tom, the Space Defense Initiative, which was really a bluff at the time under the Reagan administration. Space. They didn't have the space beam in the air technology, but that was like launching, hundreds of satellites in order to knock out intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, from the Soviet Union, and that would cancel out the MAD doctrine. That would basically cancel out the ABM, everything. So but it also fell foul of the space treaty because they had nuclear components. So you couldn't have nuclear components in the atmosphere. Right. That's a no-go area according to these treaties. So
we unilaterally abrogated the ABM treaty in 2001 or 2002, right after Putin came to power, thinking that we had defeated Russia to the point where we could now, build up, and then basically we said no to the ABM treaty, walked away from it, and Putin said that's going to be bad. It's going to create another arms race, and then he immediately started setting forward on the path that they're on now with the S-300s, the S-400s, the Pantsers, and now the S-500s, which no one can even come close to touching, and only Russia has, right? There's no export version of the S-500, and I don't expect there to be any export version of it anytime soon because, the S-400s are good enough.
Let me just add to that, Tom. Russia doesn't have the pressure from corporate industry for all of these boondoggle projects.
Sure.
So the U.S. has got systems that are still deployed. They're still working on stuff. We're paying for stuff in the U.S. that will never get deployed.
Yes.
The grandfather projects, the make work projects with all of these, and that's because lobbyists are in Washington working hard to get all this stuff appropriated, and half of it's not going to be operational, or it'll be redundant by the time it gets out. Russia doesn't have that system that is so inefficient.
It is, and it's really sad because, and this is one of the reasons. Well, it's both happy and it's both good and bad because it does two things. One, it validates the criticism that government can't do anything right, and all it's going to do is waste capital. So eventually, it has to collapse under the weight of its own inefficiencies and whatnot. But unfortunately, we also have to waste 3 generations worth of the lives of people who lose their purpose and their meaning working at make work jobs and all the rest of it. And one of the things that I talk about pretty regularly, either in my market reports or in other forums, is that how much, when you really stop to look at our economy today, how much of our economy is just people sitting around pushing paper that doesn't matter, and that we already have UBI in this country, but people think they're called jobs. They go to the place to collect their UBI checks while they push papers around and do work on projects that don't matter. And how many hours of the day that they're paid for do they actually work? well, they work 3, and they're there for 8, and they work for 3. I'm not saying, and I'm not talking about the McDonald's jobs. I'm not talking about the nurses and the waiters and all the people who are providing essential services. Those people work like dogs. Like, that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about your average middle manager, your average person working a desk job, whatnot. I worked at university. I know what that looks like. I've seen that on a daily basis. I've been a part of it, and I had to walk away from it before my work ethic was destroyed. Like, I know what that looks like. And I can tell you that it's at least half the economy.
Yeah,
And
keeping the chair warm, right?
yeah, you're just there collecting your UBI bucks. And, so we're going to transition from, that, and we're going to transition even farther into a thing where we're just going to pay 70% of the people to stay home all the time. And you don't think that's going to have a detrimental effect on the fabric of the society? We're looping all the way back to the beginning of this conversation where I asked you how you were doing in merry old lockdown England.
Well, you just have to read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and that'll give you a little indication.
I'd rather not read it again. Thank you very much.
Of what that
read
70%.
It in high school. I was horrified then.
Yeah, you're right. 70% without a meaning or a purpose. And I think the space conversation is really important in this way. And this might be a good way to close the circle on this conversation today. But, when I grew up, Tom, I grew up in Florida in the 1970s, and, there was a lot of excitement growing up and not just with children, but adults, because the space program was kind of, had come into its own. The Enterprise space shuttle had just been launched. There were launches going off at Cape Canaveral all the time, Kennedy Space Center. It was amazing. And that's when Star Wars came out in 1977. And, it captured the imagination of the generation whereby, we're looking to, we're looking to outer space and almost transcending our problems of the Cold War, I guess at that time, sure. Transcending our problems on Earth and looking up into the heavens. And in a way, it did kind of allow at least an outlet for you to rise above the petty partisan machinations down on Earth, and put your imagination and your purpose and your innovation and driving it, propelling it upwards and forwards in time and history. And I think when then the world closed, then that window somehow closed in the 90s, and we became with the internet an inward-looking civilization rather than outward-looking. I think, in my opinion, there was a paradigm shift which happened at some point in that continuum, and that's brought us to where we are today. So I think it's interesting. There's not as much talk about Mars as there is about operational 5G satellite arrays beaming stuff down on us in low Earth orbit. I find that to be very strange.
It's like, and they co-opted the environmental movement away from pollution, from pollution to global warming, in order to take people's eyes off the greater prize and put their eyes firmly on the ground, and take away their ambition to strive and do something better, right? Because, but how will that affect the environment? How will that affect this? How will that affect that? And everybody has to stop and ask 18 questions about whether or not this particular act I'm going to take will satisfy the prevention principle first before they can actually act. And I think that's probably a different discussion for a different day. And that's why I think guys like Bezos and Musk, should be viewed both positively and negatively. I mean, regardless of what they're doing, regardless of how successful they are, like all the crazy stuff that they're doing in many ways.
What's their vision? What's their vision, Tom? Is it to build an empire for their industry, for themselves, or is their vision a transhumanist vision? I think it's kind of important that we know these things.
I agree, and I would really like to nail them down on this, because I would be happier if I understood it. But at the same time, in the current political climate, nailing yourself down to one position or another is, we know what that looks like, and it's dangerous. And when you're in their position, it's even more dangerous. because, so, I mean, again, I'm not absolving them of, probably if we had Whitney Webb on this call with us, she'd be like, no, Tom, you're completely wrong. I can tell you why. I'm like, great, Whitney, tell it to me. And I can like feel her on my shoulder while I'm doing this, right? I just want to make sure that, these are the questions we should be asking, and these are the questions we should be demanding. And that's and unfortunately we have a media that's completely captured. We have a political system that's completely dysfunctional, while the central bankers run the table and try and, turn this into insect eating, food playing monkeys. It's great. Isn't that the future? Wow. That's not the future that was the future I read when I read all that Philip K. Dick when I was a teenager, and I was horrified by it then, as opposed to, the one you just described.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also the issue of religion, the issue of the U.S. arguably as a country, as an example, it's based on absolutely Christian foundations, or monotheistic, let's say, right. Foundations. You can include other people into that, welcome other people into that fold as well. And that's also the basis of natural law, which is the basis of the society of Western post-Enlightenment, Western civilization, or Western civilization, go back to the Greeks even, that there is something, something above the just straight rationality. So why is that important? That's important because I want to know what Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos' beliefs are in that department.
I agree.
And is that going to inform their politics or their vision, their worldview, or their view of future society? And hence is going to influence where they're going to be allocating their resources, their fortunes, their energy, their motivation in the coming years. That's kind of important to know. You're talking about an inordinate amount of wealth and power right now.
I agree. Agreed. And these are questions we need to answer. So, Patrick, thank you so much for exploring those ideas with me today. I think it was this was a talk that was absolutely necessary given the current situation. So I really appreciate you doing this on short notice, as you always do. And we'll have you on again, near future. All right.
Yeah, my pleasure, Tom.
I appreciate it, man. You take care. You have a great day now.
Okay.
Well, that'll about do it for episode 67 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, Patrick is always a very intriguing and enlightening individual to talk to. So, as always, you can follow my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter and Gab at TFL1728. And you can sign up for the Gold, Goats, and Guns investment newsletter over on Patreon at patreon.com/Gold, Goats, and Guns. You have both the newsletter and the twice-weekly market reports available to you on a regular basis. So you guys take care. We'll talk soon. Be well. Keep your stick on the ice.
At Honda, we decided to stop listening to what cars do for a moment, and instead start listening to all the things hands do. They carry, scratch, open, close, zip, chop, spread, shake, pour, mix, fix, fold, type, tear. Isn't it time we gave hands a rest? With keyless entry, a tailgate that opens with the wave of a foot, voice-controlled entertainment, and automatically adjusting seats. The Honda CR-V Hybrid. What do you think, hands? Honda, the power of dreams. Available in selected grades.
We're still open for drive-through and McDelivery, but helping keep you and our team safe is our priority. So we have fewer people working. We have screens in our kitchens and service areas. We're washing our hands more regularly and cleaning equipment and surfaces even more often too. And from pickup to drop-off, delivery is contact-free. With smaller teams, service will take longer than usual, so thank you for your patience. For specific restaurant hours, visit mcdonalds.co.uk or download our app. Opening hours may vary.